They say family is everything. But mine? They kept the receipt. It was a Tuesday evening like any other. The familiar creak of the stairs, the scent of leftover pot roast wafting from the kitchen, and the hum of the old ceiling fan reminded me that nothing had changed in this house since I was 16, except, of course, how much I was expected to pay to keep it running. I was home for less than 5 minutes when Mom stopped me by the fridge, holding a folded piece of paper like it was an invoice from God himself. "Claire, honey," she cooed with that sugary voice she used whenever she wanted something. "I need your rent for this month. 800 should do." I blinked. "Rent?" She smiled, all warmth and sweetness, but her eyes didn't waver. "This isn't a hotel, Claire. Everyone contributes." I wanted to argue, to remind her I'd just covered the internet bill, paid for the groceries last week, and replaced the broken microwave. But I could already hear her prepared response, the way she'd tilt her head and sigh like I was overreacting. It wasn't worth it. So I nodded, mumbled something like, "Sure," and headed to my room, biting down the frustration that was beginning to bubble just beneath my skin. Later that night, I found Brandon in the kitchen, lounging at the counter in his faded college hoodie, a spoon halfway to his mouth. He was eating my favorite cereal, the one I'd bought, and didn't even blink when I walked in. "Hey," he said through a mouthful. "Mom said I should focus on finals this week, so I'm off dish duty." I leaned against the doorway. "You mean you're not helping out at all?" He shrugged, unapologetic. "She said I should relax. It's my last semester." Of course she did. I poured myself a glass of water, my thoughts racing. Brandon hadn't held a part-time job since sophomore year. Meanwhile, I'd been working since I was 17. He had no savings, no plan, just a mother who saw him as a budding genius and a father who didn't dare disagree. That night, lying in bed, I opened my banking app and transferred the $800 to Mom's account. It was automatic now, like brushing my teeth or locking the door. I didn't even question it, but something felt off. The next morning, I passed by the dining room table and saw Mom's laptop open, her face aglow from the screen. She didn't notice me at first, too focused on what she was doing. I paused, silently watching from behind. It was a credit card portal. The name on the account wasn't hers. It was Brandon's. I froze. She was paying off his balance, using my money. I stepped back without a word, heart pounding in my chest. My hands trembled slightly, but I curled them into fists. I shouldn't be surprised. Deep down, I wasn't. But something about seeing it with my own eyes, my salary clearing his mess, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. That evening, I sat at the dinner table with them like I always did. Chicken and mashed potatoes. Normal, peaceful. Robert read the newspaper. Brandon scrolled on his phone. Mom passed me the peas like nothing had happened. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream. But instead, I set down my fork and looked at her. "Is this how it's always going to be?" She looked up with that gentle smile she'd worn for years, the one that made me feel guilty for even thinking she might be wrong. "As long as we're a family," she said softly. "Yes." ChatGPT, John Noi, no kung chila tien hole. It was the assumption that I'd always say yes. The morning sunlight spilled gently through the blinds, casting soft stripes across my bedroom floor. Outside, the chirping birds and warm spring air spoke of renewal, beginnings. Inside, I was wrapping a secondhand game console for Brandon's birthday like it was a peace offering to a spoiled prince. I'd found the old console on a neighborhood app. Barely used, still in the box. $50. It felt thoughtful but not extravagant, just enough to show I remembered without selling a kidney. I even tied a blue ribbon around the box, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'd appreciate the gesture. As I came downstairs to place the gift on the dining table, Mom appeared behind me, her voice soft and sing-song as always. "You know, Claire, one of the girls in my class told me her older sister gave her a car when she graduated." I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. "A car?" She nodded slowly, her smile unwavering. A used one, of course, but still it shows love. Sacrifice. My fingers tightened around the ribbon. Brandon's not even graduating yet. Well, almost, she replied lightly. And he's been working so hard, hasn't he? Don't you want him to succeed? It was the same song, different verse. She never asked me to give more. She just laid the breadcrumbs and waited for me to pick them up. I bit my tongue, already hearing the next part of the script in my head. Brandon needs a better computer for his future. A car is too much, but surely a PC isn't unreasonable. After all, I could afford it, right? His laptop's so old, Mom added, as if reading my thoughts. And the fan's noisy. Maybe that's why his grades have been slipping. He was averaging a C+. A new PC wasn't going to change that. Still, I nodded. Because that's what I did. It wasn't agreement. It was surrender. Later that afternoon, Naomi FaceTimed me. Her hair was wrapped in a towel, fresh from a shower, but she caught my expression in an instant. "What's going on?" she asked. I hesitated, then flipped the camera to show the open browser tab. A custom-built PC cart, totaling $3,482 after tax. Naomi squinted, then raised an eyebrow so high I thought it might disappear into her hairline. "Claire, tell me you're not going to hit buy now." I shrugged. "He needs it." "No, you need to stop. He's not a kid anymore." "I know, but..." "No buts. Does he even know you're doing this?" "Of course not. Brandon probably assumed his old laptop was fine, until Mom started planting the seed. Now he'd expect something bigger, flashier. And if it didn't come from me, it'd still be my fault for falling short." Naomi sighed. "I get it. You love your family, but love doesn't mean burning yourself to keep them warm." Her words settled in the pit of my stomach like a rock, but they didn't stop me. After we hung up, I stared at the screen for a long time. My cursor hovered over the Confirm Purchase button. I could close the tab. I could call Brandon, tell him what I was planning, see if he even cared. Instead, I reached for my credit card, the one I promised myself I wouldn't touch this year. I typed in the numbers, clicked Submit, and closed my laptop like slamming a door I knew I wouldn't walk back through. That night, while brushing my teeth, I got the email. "Your order has been confirmed. Estimated delivery, March 18th. I stared at the screen, the confirmation glowing in blue. There goes my savings. Again. The day the PC arrived, no one said thank you. But Brandon asked, "Why not the latest model?" The delivery truck rumbled away just as the morning sun spilled across our cracked driveway. I stood there, hands sore from lugging 2 oversized boxes inside. Foam peanuts clung to my clothes like static regret. The excitement I expected, the wide eyes, the thanks, even just a nod, never came. Brandon emerged from the living room in his stained hoodie and mismatched socks, glanced at the tower and monitor on the floor, and shrugged. "Why not the latest model?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He didn't even look up. "It's just, this one's like last year's release, right? It's fine, I guess." I stared at him, words catching like splinters in my throat. He walked past me to grab a soda from the fridge, humming like it was any other Saturday. Like I hadn't just spent more than a month's rent on something I'd convinced myself was a gesture of love. He never asked me to, but he also never refused to benefit. After dragging everything upstairs to his room, I opened each box, unwrapped cables, clipped plastic seals, and readjusted the airflow panels. Brandon sat on his bed, scrolling his phone, muttering occasionally about specs. I asked him to hand me a screwdriver. He tossed it in my direction without looking. It landed with a dull clank beside my ankle. 3 hours later, the system booted. The screen lit up with a soft blue glow. Clean, sharp, pristine. I called him over. "Try it out," I said. He slid into the chair, clicked around a bit, nodded once, then resumed texting. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. Downstairs, Mom was frosting a cake like it was a national holiday. She didn't even ask how the build had gone, just smiled and said, Does your brother like it? I looked at her, the spatula in her hand, the hopeful tilt of her head. I thought about saying something, about how Brandon barely acknowledged it, how my credit card was crying, how I was exhausted and numb. But the words dissolved before they reached my lips. So I nodded, silent again. That evening, dinner was meatloaf and passive aggression. Brandon scarfed down 3 servings without saying a word. Dad set his fork down and glanced toward the stairs. You did good, Claire, he said casually. But your brother deserves more. It hit like a slap wrapped in cotton. More? I echoed, half laughing. He hasn't even said thanks. Dad frowned, sipping his iced tea. He's under pressure. Finals, job hunting. You wouldn't understand. I bit down so hard on my tongue I tasted iron. The rest of dinner blurred. Plates scraped, chairs creaked, the television murmured in the background. I was there, but not really there. My body sat, ate, nodded when required. But my mind had already retreated upstairs where my laptop waited. That night, I opened a blank document and stared at the blinking cursor. Then I typed, I'm not a bad daughter, but maybe they're bad parents. I didn't even read it twice before hitting save. Then, slowly, deliberately, I picked up my phone, opened the app that controlled Brandon's new PC remotely, and tapped delete. A warning popped up. Are you sure you want to remove this device? I hovered, then tapped yes. It vanished from the list. A beat passed. Then I opened the App Store and reinstalled it. They planned a party. I planned a withdrawal. Balloons, banners, and buffet menus. They had it all under control. Linda paced through the living room, holding a printed schedule and talking into her phone like she was managing a presidential inauguration. Professor Hamilton is confirmed. Oh, and the Carsons from the PTA. Yes, they'll be here too. She beamed, turning to me. It's going to be the event of the year. I was curled on the arm of the sofa, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the circus unfold. Brandon strolled in moments later, yawning, still in his pajamas. He grunted something that sounded like approval and tossed his phone on the table. Screen lit up with texts from girls and classmates congratulating him on making it. Linda turned to me again. Oh, Claire, don't forget to pick up the catering trays this Friday. I blinked. I'm working Friday. She waved it off. I told your boss you'd be late. This is a family event. Of course she did, because my time was hers to schedule. I looked up. Who's paying for this again? She laughed. I am. Who else? The lie was so casual it almost felt like a joke. Yeah, right, I murmured, smiling faintly. As usual? She didn't catch the tone. Or maybe she chose not to. The sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns on the floor, a poetic contrast to the slow burn inside my chest. I retreated to my room. As the door clicked shut behind me, I opened my laptop and stared at Brandon's PC ID glowing in the admin panel. Still synced. Still mine to command. I moved quickly. First, I created a new email account, one Brandon couldn't trace. Then I transferred the admin rights from my personal account to the burner. The interface blinked once, confirming the shift. I felt no thrill, just clarity. Then I opened the controls. Set remote lock timer? It asked. I clicked yes and selected 72 hours. A quiet hum rose in my ears. Not from the fan, not from my laptop, but from a storm building quietly inside me. That evening, Naomi called. Her voice, as always, was calm but edged with disbelief. Wait. You really transferred admin rights? You're serious about this? I'm not pulling the plug, I said. Not yet. There was a pause. Claire, you sure about this? I looked out the window. Linda was in the yard now, fussing with tablecloth colors. Brandon lounged in a lawn chair, sunglasses on, barking into his phone about party themes and vibe consistency. I typed out my reply slowly. It's not revenge, it's closure. And I meant it. Not a tantrum. Not a show. Just the beginning of letting go. 3 days. That was all. He blew out the candles. I blew up the illusion. Applause erupted as Brandon leaned over the cake, a smug grin on his face, and puffed out his cheeks for the final blow. The candles flickered once, then died under his breath. Phones clicked. Linda clapped like a pageant mom. The crowd, mostly professors, PTA acquaintances, and Linda's garden club, cheered with polite enthusiasm. "Congratulations, sweetheart." Linda beamed, adjusting Brandon's collar like he was still 8. The restaurant glowed under soft amber lights, the kind that made everyone look kinder than they were. Tables were decorated with small golden frames of Brandon's childhood photos, glossy and carefully placed. One showed him with chocolate smeared on his face at age 4. Another was his awkward prom shot, arm slung over a girl who didn't last past junior year. I sat quietly in the corner next to Naomi. She was recording on her phone, pretending to capture the moment for posterity. But I knew her better. Her camera wasn't just collecting memories, it was collecting proof. Linda called for attention. "Now, before we move on to dessert, my daughter Claire has a little surprise for the guest of honor." Heads turned. Some smiled, some whispered. I stood, smoothing my navy blue dress and picking up the box from the chair beside me. It was neatly wrapped, but I had made sure the tape would peel off without effort. I walked toward Brandon, heels clicking on the tile like a metronome ticking down. He raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. "Didn't think you'd top the PC?" He smirked. I handed him the box. "Thank you," I said softly. He blinked. "For what?" "For all you didn't notice." That silenced him. For a moment, laughter rippled through the guests, those who assumed it was a witty toast. Brandon tore off the wrapping and opened the lid. Inside was the PC's original startup disk, nestled in tissue paper. He frowned, reached for the power button on the laptop already sitting on the restaurant's tech table, where he'd proudly displayed it earlier during a slideshow of his academic journey. The screen lit up. System locked. Return to sender. A few people chuckled, unsure whether this was a prank or a clever gift. But the laughter faltered when the screen stayed frozen. Brandon's mouth twitched. "What the hell?" he muttered, tapping keys. Nothing. Linda moved toward him, still smiling. "What's going on?" I turned to her. "That," I said, "is the last dollar you'll ever see from me." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I walked past her, past the stunned crowd, and toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Robert rise, his voice unusually loud. "Claire, wait." I stopped, hand on the door. "Number, I'm done waiting." The silence that followed was thicker than the frosting on Brandon's cake. Getting kicked out felt less like exile, and more like release. The air in the new apartment was still. Not quiet, just still, like a held breath. A single fan buzzed lazily from the ceiling, stirring the scent of new paint and cheap pine flooring. Claire stood in the center of the room with a cardboard box in one hand and her phone in the other. No framed pictures, no floral curtains, no passive-aggressive post-it notes on the fridge. Just silence. And her. Naomi was balancing a rice cooker on one hip and a tote bag in the other. "You need a couch." "I need furniture," Claire said, setting the box down near the wall. They both laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was relief. The studio was barely 400 square feet. A kitchenette with 2 cabinets, a bathroom with a door that didn't quite shut all the way, and a window that overlooked the back of a nail salon. But for Claire, it was the first thing in her adult life she had chosen without permission. Her phone buzzed. "Linda, Mom. You've made your choice. Don't come crying back when you realize how ungrateful you've been." She didn't reply. Instead, she opened her banking app and tapped through the menus. The joint card she had with her mother, technically opened when she was 17 just to build credit, was still active. Claire swiped to close it. The app asked, "Are you sure?" She tapped yes, twice. Then she moved on. Email, new password. Apple ID, Logged out all devices, streaming accounts changed. Even the family Amazon Prime. She deauthorized every shared login. No more order placed by Linda receipts at 2 a.m. Naomi peeked over her shoulder. "You're going full witness protection, huh?" Claire offered a half smile. "It's not protection. It's prevention." Naomi pulled out 2 paper cups of iced coffee from her bag and handed one over. "You deserve peace, Claire." Claire took the coffee, then sat cross-legged on the floor. Her laptop hummed as it powered on. "I didn't tell you before," Naomi said, settling beside her. "But 2 years ago, your mom borrowed your credit card." Claire looked up. Naomi nodded. "Remember that time Brandon miraculously paid off his car repair bill in one go?" "Yeah, that was you." Claire felt her jaw tighten, the sting of betrayal, old and new, fusing together. "How did you know?" "I was there. I saw the receipt in your mom's bag. Your name was on it." Claire stared at the laptop screen. A blank document glared back, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. She clicked Compose New Email. To Linda Subject, Account Usage Body. Any spending from my account will have to be approved. And I don't approve anymore. She clicked Send. The feeling wasn't triumph. It was stillness. The kind that follows a hurricane when everything is broken but finally quiet. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a single message from her father. "Robert. Ungrateful." Claire stared at it. Then she placed the phone face down on the floor, leaned back against the wall, and exhaled. Not in anger, not in grief, but in something closer to rebirth. Freedom is quiet, but so is loneliness. By mid-June, Claire had settled into a rhythm that felt eerily smooth. Wake, dress, work, home, repeat. Her studio was tidy, almost sterile, with the bed always made and the dishes always done. There were no voices behind walls, no footsteps at midnight, no laughter that stung. But the silence pressed in like fog, soft, constant, and oddly suffocating. The first few nights were the hardest. She caught herself glancing at her phone, waiting for messages she no longer wanted. She stared at the kitchen table and half expected Linda to appear with a long list of needs masked as motherly advice. But the chair stayed empty, and Claire stayed alone. On a slow Saturday morning, she ducked into a cafe downtown, half to escape the walls of her apartment, half for the illusion of company. She ordered a cappuccino and scanned the room for a seat. That's when she saw her. Emily Tran. They hadn't spoken in years. Not since high school, when Claire vaguely remembered Emily coming over for group projects, her arms always wrapped tightly around a worn notebook. Claire approached cautiously. "Emily?" Emily looked up and blinked, surprised. Then she smiled. Genuine, if hesitant. "Claire, wow, it's been forever." They sat, coffee between them, old classmates awkwardly trying to bridge a decade of distance. Claire mentioned moving out, vaguely gesturing at family stuff. Emily hesitated, then leaned in. "You know Brandon got that scholarship I applied for?" Claire blinked. "He said it was merit-based." Emily's lips curled into something bitter. "My mom got a call from yours. Said if I didn't withdraw gracefully, she'd make things hard. Next day, I was off the list." Claire stared at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily shrugged. "You were always so loyal to them. I figured you'd just defend him." Claire couldn't speak. Something cold and heavy settled in her chest. It wasn't just her. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't overreacting. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She let it ring. Then another call. Then a voicemail. Later, walking home, she finally listened. Linda's voice poured into her ear, syrupy and slow, like a hymn from a forgotten church. "No matter where you go, Claire, you'll always be one of us. Blood doesn't forget. Family doesn't break. You'll come home. You always do." Claire sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her fingers moved on muscle memory. She opened her recorder app and hit Save Voicemail. Then she scrolled back, selected every call, every message from Linda, from Brandon, even the vague, emoji-filled ones that meant nothing on the surface but felt like hooks beneath. Save all. Naomi visited that evening with Thai takeout, and the kind of sarcasm only best friends could get away with. "You okay?" she asked, unpacking noodles. Claire nodded. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Lying doesn't suit you." Claire sighed. "I saw Emily today. Turns out Brandon's win was my loss. Again." Naomi didn't look surprised, just quietly angry. "They're not done," she said finally, sliding a spring roll across the table. "Brace yourself." Claire looked out the window where the streetlights flickered. The piece she'd carved for herself was real, but fragile. And somewhere in the shadows, the storm was circling back. When they reached out, it wasn't for me. It was for my money. The invitation came in the form of a cheerful voicemail. Brandon's voice, softer than she remembered, played through her earbuds as she walked home from work. "Hey, Claire. Been thinking about you a lot. Mom and Dad want to get dinner this weekend. Just us. Let's talk. I miss you." Claire didn't reply. Not immediately. She played it 3 times. She even let it ring out in the empty studio, just to hear what her silence sounded like against his carefully constructed sweetness. Still, part of her wanted to believe. By Saturday, she'd decided. If they wanted a meeting, she'd give them one. But she'd bring her armor. The restaurant was upscale, nestled in a quiet part of East Sacramento. Soft lighting, linen tablecloths, and that familiar tone in Linda's voice the moment Claire walked in. Eager, rehearsed. "Sweetheart, you look beautiful," Linda said, reaching for a hug that Claire politely half returned. Robert gave a nod. Brandon grinned like a man who'd rehearsed the expression in the mirror. They ordered quickly, small talk layered over appetizers. Brandon asked about her work. Vaguely, like someone trying to sound interested without really listening. Linda complimented Claire's outfit, then brought up family photos she wanted to update. Then the real reason surfaced, of course, over the entree. "So," Brandon said, twirling his fork with faux casual ease, "I've been working on this project idea. A cafe/co-working space. You know? Trendy, minimal, eco-friendly. I've even got a concept name. Grounds and Goals." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Catchy." Linda leaned in, smiled tight. "He's so passionate, Claire. You should see his vision board. We think it's the perfect way for him to settle into something real, something stable." Robert sipped his wine and said nothing. Claire took a slow breath, let it sit in her chest like smoke. "So you're opening a business?" "Well," Brandon drawled, "it's still in the concept phase. I mean, there's this little funding hiccup." Linda patted his hand. "We were thinking maybe you could help. Just a small loan. 30,000. We'd pay you back." "Of course." Claire didn't flinch. She set down her knife and looked at Linda. "Of course," she said, voice smooth. "But does Mom have a mortgage?" The table froze. Robert blinked. Brandon shifted in his seat. Linda's smile faltered. I don't see what that has to do with—" Claire turned to her father, gaze steady. "Dad, you always taught me that money should be backed by something real. That responsibility has to come with leverage.